Hansel touched the small device on his belt, and immediately the great display screens around the assembly hall came to life. The images that appeared sent shockwaves through the gathered alien delegates. Dozens of sleek human warships hung in space around the very station where they were meeting. The ships were unlike anything in the Council databases, with smooth, dark hulls that seemed to bend light around them. The camera feeds showed the human fleet from multiple angles, revealing just how completely they had surrounded the Council station without anyone detecting them. Human ships had moved into position and were now close enough to destroy the entire facility within minutes. The weapons on the ships were not yet powered up, but their targeting systems were clearly active and locked onto the station. General Vex stared at the displays in disbelief. "This cannot be real," he growled. "Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing can approach this station without being detected hours in advance. These images must be fabricated, some kind of human trickery." Hansel smiled politely and gestured toward the screens. "I assure you, General, the images are quite real. Your sensors are indeed advanced, but they are calibrated to detect the kinds of technology your species use. Human ships operate on different principles entirely. We have been studying Council technology for quite some time and have learned how to avoid your detection methods." Council leader Morpheus' crystal shell flickered rapidly as he processed this information. "Explained how this is possible." No species has ever managed to approach our station undetected. Our defensive systems are designed to identify any potential threat from vast distance." Human Diplomat clasped his hands behind his back and began to pace slowly across his platform, a gesture that somehow seemed more threatening than any weapon display. "Respected Council leader, humanity learned early in our space exploration that the galaxy was full of potentially hostile civilizations. We developed our technology with stealth and survival as primary concerns rather than impressive displays of power." He gestured again toward the screens, showing the human fleet every ship. "You see, there has been in position for over 3 weeks. They have been watching your daily operations, studying your patrol patterns and learning about your defensive capabilities. We know the shift schedules of your security forces, the response times of your emergency systems, and the locations of all your critical infrastructure." The implications of this revelation began to sink in throughout the chamber. If humans could position an entire fleet around the most secure facility in the galaxy without being detected, what else might they be capable of? The arrogant assumptions about human weakness were crumbling as delegates realized they had been observed and analyzed like specimens in a laboratory. The Sci-Fi representative stood and spoke in rapid musical tones that the translators converted to urgent words. "This suggests capabilities far beyond what our intelligence reports indicated. How long have you been watching us? What other Council facilities have been compromised?" Turned to face the Sci-Fi delegate directly. "We have been observing Council activities for approximately 18 months since we first learned of your existence. During that time we have studied your major military installations, your trade routes, your communication networks, and your political structures. We found it necessary to understand the galactic situation before making any diplomatic overtures." Chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began shouting questions and accusations in dozens of different languages. The careful order of the Council session dissolved into panic as species began demanding answers about their own security. The Hive Lords were clicking rapidly in what sounded like emergency communications, while the Volt were moving into defensive formations through the chaos. General Vex's voice boomed louder than all the others. "Treachery, deception, espionage. This proves that humans cannot be trusted. They have violated our space, conducted illegal surveillance, and now threaten us with military force. I demand the right of combat trial to settle this matter." The ancient tradition of combat trial was recognized by most Council species as a legitimate way to resolve disputes that could not be settled through negotiation. It was considered the ultimate test of a species' worthiness, where technological advantages were set aside in favor of personal skill and courage. Many delegates immediately began voicing their support for Vex's demand. Hansel stopped pacing and looked directly at the massive Krathan. "General, I accept your challenge, General Vex." He began removing his diplomatic jacket with calm, measured movements that suggested he had been expecting this possibility as he folded the jacket neatly and placed it on a nearby chair. The chamber combat protocols activated automatically. Energy barriers rose around the spectator areas while the central platform expanded and cleared to create a proper fighting space. The lighting shifted to focus on the combat area and medical teams moved into position around the perimeter. The delegates settled into their seats with eager anticipation, expecting to witness the destruction of the presumptuous human diplomat. What none of them realized was that they had just made the single worst decision possible by challenging Hansel to personal combat. They had shifted the encounter from diplomacy to warfare, from negotiation to survival. The mild-mannered diplomat they thought they were about to watch die was actually something far more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Hansel removed his tie and rolled up his sleeves. His entire posture began to change. The diplomatic courtesy that had characterized his behavior throughout the session was being replaced by something harder and more focused. His movements became more fluid and controlled, his breathing deeper and more rhythmic. General Vex began his own combat preparations, flexing his 6 massive arms and activating the energy weapons that were part of his natural biology. The Krathan general stood over 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating that could deflect most weapons. His 4 legs provided perfect stability, while his 6 arms gave him incredible reach and striking power. He had fought in hundreds of combat trials across dozens of worlds and had never been defeated. His species were legendary warriors who had conquered entire star systems through personal combat prowess. To him, the small human in the simple black suit looked like the easiest opponent he had ever faced. The combat barriers finished activating and the referee systems came online. General Vex raised all 6 arms in a traditional Krathan war salute. Prepare to die, soft creature, he roared. Your species will learn the price of deception when I present them with your broken body. Hansel said nothing. He simply removed his glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them on top of his jacket. When he looked up at General Vex, something fundamental had changed in his expression. The kind, diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by the cold, focused stare of a predator who had found his prey. The transformation was subtle but complete. The diplomat had disappeared, and in his place stood something that made even the most aggressive delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The combat trial was about to begin, and the aliens were about to learn exactly why humans had earned their place among the stars. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Council was even more impressive from the inside than Hansel had imagined. Massive columns reached up toward a ceiling that seemed to fade into darkness. High above, the floor was made of some kind of crystal that reflected the lights from thousands of different alien technologies, creating patterns that shifted and danced with every movement. Hansel walked to the small platform designated for him in the center of the hall. His footsteps echoed in the vast space, despite the presence of so many beings around him. As he climbed the steps to his speaking position, he could feel thousands of eyes, or whatever aliens used for seeing, watching his every move. Some of the attention felt curious, but most of it felt hostile. The council leader was introduced as Morpheus, an ancient being of pure energy contained within a crystal shell that floated several meters above the main floor. His voice resonated through the chamber without need for translation devices as he spoke directly into the minds of all present. Welcome, representatives of the galaxy. Today we examine the petition of the species called humans for membership in our council. Around the chamber, Hansel could see the various alien species arranged in their traditional formations. The warlike Krathan stood in aggressive postures with their 6 arms positioned near their weapons. The insectoid hive lords clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns that sounded like war drums. The peaceful-looking gardeners had somehow managed to position themselves to block several of the main exits. Hansel took careful note of these arrangements. His military training had taught him to always be aware of his surroundings, and right now his surroundings were telling him that this was not going to be a normal diplomatic meeting. Something about the way the aliens were positioned suggested they had already made their decision about humanity, and it was not a positive one. The first speaker was introduced as General Vex of the Krathan Empire, a massive creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 powerful legs. His 6 arms were each as thick as a human torso, and his natural armor plating looked like it could stop bullets. Hansel had read about the Krathan in his briefing materials. They were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds through pure military might. General Vex stepped forward, and his voice boomed through the chamber without any need for amplification. We have studied these humans and found them to be weak and pathetic creatures. They have no natural armor, no energy weapons, no telepathic abilities. They are soft meat creatures who should have been eaten by predators on their own world instead of somehow developing space travel. The Krathan general gestured toward Hansel with 2 of his arms. Their representative stands before us, wearing nothing but cloth and looking like he would break if we breathed on him too hard. How can such a species expect to survive in a galaxy filled with real predators and warriors? Their ships are primitive, their weapons are crude, and their military consists of a few hundred vessels scattered across one tiny system. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly as other species began to voice their own opinions about humanity. The sympathy representatives stood and spoke in their musical language while holographic displays showed images of human cities and technology. See how they still use metal and plastic in their constructions, while we have transcended physical matter. Their computers are mechanical devices, while ours are grown from living crystal. Their transportation relies on chemical propulsion, while we fold space itself. The Hive Lord speaker made chittering sounds that the translators converted into words. These humans have no hive mind, no collective consciousness. Each individual acts independently without coordination or shared purpose. They cannot possibly function as a unified species in galactic affairs. Their primitive individualism makes them unsuitable for council membership. Hansel listened to each criticism with the same calm expression he had worn since entering the station. He occasionally took notes on a simple paper notepad, which seemed to amuse several of the alien delegates who were used to more advanced recording methods. His face showed no anger, no frustration, no fear, just polite attention as speaker after speaker explained why humanity was unworthy. The mockery continued for over 2 hours. Each species seemed to want their turn to explain why humans were too primitive, too weak, too disorganized to deserve a place in galactic civilization. The Volt complained about human physical frailty. The Mindari criticized human emotional instability. The Nexari questioned human technological development. Every aspect of human civilization was examined and found wanting. Through it all, Hansel remained seated on his small platform, occasionally sipping water from a simple plastic bottle and writing in his notepad. His calm demeanor seemed to irritate some of the more aggressive speakers who had clearly expected him to react with anger or fear. Instead, he looked like someone attending a mildly interesting lecture on a subject that did not particularly concern him. Finally, Council Leader Morpheus called for order and the chamber fell silent. The ancient being's crystal shell pulsed with light as he prepared to deliver what everyone assumed would be the final judgment. We have heard the evidence presented by our member species. The evaluation of humanity is complete. You are found to be unsuitable for council membership. Your species will return to your home system and remain there. Any attempt to expand beyond your current borders will be met with the full military might of the council. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval as the alien delegates celebrated what they saw as a victory over human arrogance. Many of them began making gestures that Hansel's cultural briefings had taught him were expressions of dominance and superiority. The Krathon general flexed all 6 arms in a display meant to show his readiness for combat. Han stood slowly and walked to the center of his platform. He adjusted his glasses and looked around the chamber with the same mild expression he had maintained throughout the session. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the vast space despite being much quieter than the alien speakers who had preceded him. Honored council members, he began, I want to thank you for your honest assessment of humanity. It is always valuable to hear outside perspectives on our civilization. However, I believe there may be some misunderstandings about our current situation that I should clarify. He paused and seemed to consider his words carefully. You see, we did not come here seeking permission to exist in this galaxy. We came here as a courtesy to introduce ourselves to our neighbors and to explore the possibility of peaceful cooperation. We appreciate your offer to allow us to remain in our home system, but I am afraid that ship has already sailed, as we humans like to say. Chamber began to buzz with confused murmurs as delegates tried to understand what the human diplomat was suggesting. Hansel continued speaking in the same calm tone. Humanity has been active in this galaxy for quite some time now. We have established colonies in 47 star systems. Our merchant fleets operate trade routes that span 6 different spiral arms. We have made contact with over 200 different species, many of whom have become our partners and allies. General Vex roared, his displeasure impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such expansion. You lie soft creature, trying to make your pathetic species seem more important than it is. Hansel smiled for the first time since entering the chamber and reached for a small device attached to his belt. I understand your skepticism, he said. Perhaps a demonstration would help clarify things. Hansel stepped off the transport ship and onto the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. His black shoes made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor as he walked through the entrance corridor. The walls around him were covered in strange symbols and patterns from dozens of different alien worlds. Colors he had never seen before danced across the surfaces in ways that made his eyes water slightly if he looked too long. The human diplomat wore a simple black suit with a white shirt and dark blue tie, nothing fancy or decorated like the other beings he could see moving through the corridors around him. His hair was neatly combed and his face was clean-shaven behind wire-rimmed glasses. His dark eyes took in everything around him with quiet interest. He carried a small leather briefcase in his left hand and walked with steady, confident steps around him. The corridor buzzed with activity. Tall, thin creatures with blue skin and 4 arms glided past, speaking in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes. Short, fat beings covered in what looked like rock armor stomped by on heavy feet, leaving small cracks in the floor where they stepped. Floating jellyfish-like aliens drifted overhead, their translucent bodies pulsing with soft light as they communicated through color changes. Hansel had studied files on most of these species during his long journey to the station. The blue-skinned ones were called Silethi, and they were known for their advanced technology and cold logical thinking. The rock-armored creatures were Volturi, who came from a high-gravity world and were incredibly strong. The floating jellyfish were Mindari, who could read thoughts and emotions from other beings. As he walked, Hansel noticed how the other aliens looked at him. Some pointed with whatever they used for hands. Others made sounds that his translator device told him were probably laughter. A few of the more aggressive-looking species bared their teeth or claws in what seemed like threatening gestures. None of them looked impressed by the human representative. This did not bother Hansel at all. He had expected this kind of reaction. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only developed faster than light travel 20 years ago and had spent most of that time exploring empty systems and avoiding contact with other species until they felt ready. The Galactic Council had finally tracked down human space and sent an invitation for Earth to send a representative to their great meeting hall. The corridor opened up into a vast central area that took Hansel's breath away. The ceiling stretched up so high he could barely see it, and the walls curved away in all directions. Hundreds of different species moved through the space in organized chaos. Each group seemed to have its own area marked by symbols and colors that matched their home. World Chancellor checked the directions on his datapad and began walking toward the area marked for new species applicants. He passed by a group of insect-like creatures that stood over 3 meters tall, their multiple arms weaving through the air as they clicked and buzzed at each other in rapid conversation. Near them, a cluster of beings that looked like living metal sculptures stood perfectly still except for the occasional flash of light between them. The smells in the great hall were almost overwhelming. Perfumes and natural scents from dozens of different worlds mixed together, creating a combination that was both fascinating and slightly nauseating. Hansel was grateful for the air filtration system built into his suit collar that helped filter out the worst of it. As he walked, he began to notice patterns in how the different species were arranged. The more aggressive-looking ones stood in tight groups with clear sight lines to multiple exits. The peaceful plant-like beings gathered in circular formations that seemed designed for sharing resources. The highly advanced technological species that positioned themselves near the station's communication and data systems, and Saul's military training kicked in automatically even though he was here as a diplomat. His eyes catalogued the positions of what looked like security stations, the locations of emergency exits, and the general flow of movement through the space. Old habits from his days as a soldier were hard to break, and in a situation like this with hundreds of unknown alien species, those habits might prove useful. He reached the area designated for his meeting and was greeted by a tall, elegant being with silver skin and no visible eyes. The creature spoke through a device that translated its words into clear English. "Welcome, human representative. I am Coordinator Zilnom, and I will be your guide during your time here. Please follow me to the preparation chamber, where you will receive briefing materials for your presentation to the council." Hansel bowed politely as he had been trained. "Thank you, Coordinator Zilnom. I am Ambassador Hansel of Earth, and I am honored to be here." The silver being made a gesture that might have been acknowledgement and began gliding toward a doorway marked with symbols that Hansel's translator identified as meaning preparation and waiting. The preparation chamber was smaller but still impressive, with walls covered in what looked like living displays that showed images and information about the council and its member species. Hansel was given a seat that adjusted itself to his human proportions and handed a device that would provide him with real-time translation and cultural context during the main session. As he reviewed the materials, Hansel learned more about the true scope of the Galactic Council. Over 4 different species were represented, with territories spanning most of the known galaxy. Of the council made decisions about trade routes, territorial disputes, and the admission of new species to the galactic community. Their military forces were vast, and their technology was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had developed. The more he read, the more Hansel understood why the other species seemed so dismissive of humanity. Earth controlled only one star system and had a tiny population compared to the great civilizations represented here. Human technology was primitive by galactic standards, and human military forces consisted of a few hundred ships scattered across local space. But Hansel also knew things about humanity that were not in any of the official reports. He had submitted things that his government had decided to keep secret until they better understood the galactic political situation. Humans had been busy during their 20 years of space travel, much busier than anyone suspected. Coordinator Zilnom returned to inform him that the session would begin soon. The main assembly hall was filling with representatives from across the galaxy, and the senior council members were taking their positions. Hansel gathered his materials, straightened his tie, and followed the silver being toward what would either be humanity's welcome into the galactic community or the beginning of something much more complicated. As they walked toward the great doors that led to the assembly hall, Hansel felt the familiar calm that had always come over him before important missions. Whether he was preparing for a diplomatic negotiation or a military operation, the feeling was always the same, a quiet focus that pushed away all distractions and allowed him to concentrate completely on the task ahead. The doors opened and Hansel got his first look at the full Galactic Council assembly. The sight was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the enormous chamber, their various forms creating a living tapestry of shapes, colors, and movements that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. Hansel took a deep breath, adjusted his glasses, and stepped forward into the chamber. He was ready for whatever came next. The combat arena was now fully active, with energy shields protecting the thousands of spectators who had gathered to watch what they expected to be a brief and brutal execution. General Vex stood in the center of the fighting space, his 6 arms weaving complex patterns as he activated his natural weapons. Energy blades extended from his forearms, crackling with enough power to slice through starship armor. Hansel stood opposite the massive Krathan warrior, looking almost comically small. In comparison, the human diplomat had removed his jacket and tie, but still wore his simple white shirt and black pants. His wire-rimmed glasses sat neatly folded on the chair beside his other clothes. Without them, his dark eyes seemed sharper and more focused than before. The size difference between the two fighters was extreme. General Vex towered over Hansel by more than a meter and outweighed him by several hundred kilograms. The Krathan general's natural armor plating gleamed under the arena lights, while his 4 powerful legs provided a stable base that looked impossible to topple. His 6 arms moved independently, each one capable of delivering a killing blow. Around the arena, the alien delegates leaned forward in their seats, eager to see the presumptuous human crushed. The Silethi were making musical sounds of anticipation while the Hive Lords clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns. The Volturi stomped their feet, creating a drumbeat that echoed through the chamber. Most of the spectators had already begun composing the messages they would send to their homeworlds about humanity's humiliation. Vex began his attack display, a traditional Krathen ritual meant to intimidate opponents before combat. He flexed all 6 arms in sequence, showing off the deadly energy blades that extended from each limb. His mandibles clicked as he spoke in his native language, words that the translators converted to threats and boasts about what he would do to the human. Watched this display with calm interest, his head tilted slightly as if he was studying an interesting puzzle. His breathing remained steady and controlled while his feet shifted into a more balanced stance. The change was subtle, but to anyone with combat training it was clear that the human was no longer thinking like a diplomat. The referee system announced the beginning of combat, and General Vex immediately launched himself forward with explosive speed that caught many spectators by surprise. Despite his massive size, the Krathen general moved like a striking snake, his 6 arms attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a killing technique that had defeated hundreds of opponents across dozens of worldchants. Was not there when the attacks arrived. He had moved with fluid grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics, slipping between the deadly energy blades like water flowing around stones. His movement was so smooth and natural that for a moment the spectators could not understand what had happened before General Vex could recover from his missed attack. Hansel was behind him, moving with the same impossible fluidity. One of the human's hands reached out and touched a specific point on the Krathen general's lower spine. There was a sharp cracking sound that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. General Vex's legs buckled and he crashed forward onto the arena floor with a thunderous impact that shook the entire platform. His upper arms were still functional and he tried to push himself up, but his forelegs remained completely motionless. The legendary Krathen warrior had been paralyzed with a single precise strike. The arena fell into absolute silence as the implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. General Vex, the undefeated champion of a dozen worlds, had been neutralized in less than 3 seconds by a human using nothing but his bare hands. The combat had not been a fight, it had been a surgical demonstration of superior skill and knowledge, and Saul straightened his shirt and looked around the arena with the same mild expression he had worn during the diplomatic session. "I believe the combat trial has been concluded," he said, politely to the referee system. Unless there are any objections to the result, the medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to examine General Vex while the spectators sat in stunned silence. Their cheers and anticipation had been replaced by a growing understanding that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. This was not the victory of a lucky amateur over a skilled warrior. This was the demonstration of capabilities that went far beyond anything they had imagined possible. Council leader Morpheus was the first to find his voice, though his crystal shell flickered with agitation. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Your species shows no signs of advanced physical enhancement, no genetic modifications, no cybernetic augmentation. How can a baseline human defeat our greatest warrior?" Hansel picked up his glasses and put them back on before answering. "Respected council leader, humanity developed on a world where survival required constant adaptation. We learned to fight not just other humans but predators that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than ourselves. Our ancestors survived by being smarter, more precise, and more ruthless than anything that tried to kill them." He gestured toward the paralyzed form of General Vex. "General Vex is an impressive warrior, but his fighting style is designed for combat against opponents who fight like Krathen. His techniques are perfect for defeating other members of his species, but humans developed different approaches to violence. We studied his anatomy, his movement patterns, and his tactical preferences before this encounter began." The human diplomat began putting his tie back on with the same methodical precision he had shown in removing it. "What you witnessed was not superhuman ability, it was the result of careful preparation and the application of knowledge. Every species in this council has been studied and analyzed by human specialists. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, and exactly how to exploit both." This revelation sent another shockwave through the assembled delegates. The idea that humans had been studying them as potential enemies rather than seeking their approval as supplicants was a complete reversal of everything they had assumed. The mild-mannered diplomat had just demonstrated that humanity was prepared for war, not just hoping for peace. The Silethi representative stood and spoke in urgent, musical tones that conveyed barely controlled panic. "How many of our warriors have you studied? How many of our military techniques have you analyzed? What other capabilities are you hiding from this council?" Hansel finished adjusting his tie and picked up his jacket. "We have studied all of you," he replied simply. "Every species, every military doctrine, every fighting technique used by council members. We found it necessary to understand what we might be facing if diplomatic solutions proved impossible. Today was simply a demonstration that we are prepared for any outcome." As he put on his jacket, Hansel looked around the arena at the thousands of alien faces staring back at him. The transformation from diplomat to warrior and back to diplomat was complete. But now everyone understood that the polite exterior concealed something far more dangerous. Combat trial was over, but the real negotiation was just beginning. The aliens had learned that they were not dealing with a weak species seeking their approval. They were facing a civilization that had been preparing for war while hoping for peace, and that preparation had just proven to be devastatingly effective. The aftermath of General Vex's defeats created a silence in the great assembly hall that felt heavier than the artificial gravity. Hansel stood calmly in the center of the arena, adjusting his jacket and tie as if he had just finished giving a presentation. Rather than paralyzing the galaxy's most feared warrior, the medical teams worked frantically around the fallen Krathan general, but their efforts only confirmed what everyone already knew. The damage was precise and irreversible. Council leader Morpheus' crystal shell pulsed with rapid flickers of light as he struggled to process what had just occurred. "This changes nothing," he finally declared, though his voice lacked the authority it had carried earlier. "One victory in personal combat does not make your species worthy of council membership. We have armies, fleets, technologies that span thousands of years of development. You may have surprised us today, but we are not easily intimidated." And Sol nodded thoughtfully as if he were considering the council leader's words with genuine interest. "You raise excellent points, respected leader," he said in the same diplomatic tone that had characterized his earlier speeches. "Let me address your concerns in a systematic manner." He reached for a small device on his belt, and the great display screens around the chamber came alive once again. The new images that appeared made the earlier revelation of the human fleet seem like a minor surprise. Feeds from across council space showed human warships emerging from concealment near major population centers, around military installations, and along critical trade routes. The scope of the human presence was staggering, with over 700 vessels positioned throughout the galaxy. "Regarding your fleets," Hansel began as the displays showed human ships that had been hiding in plain sight for months. "We have been observing your patrol patterns, studying your defensive strategies, and positioning our forces accordingly. Every major council world currently has human vessels within striking distance, and your military commanders never detected our presence there." Displays shifted to show ground-based operations on dozens of council worlds. Human soldiers in advanced combat armor moved through alien cities, their presence having gone completely unnoticed by local security forces. They had been gathering intelligence, mapping critical infrastructure, and preparing for contingencies that everyone hoped would never be necessary. "Second, regarding your armies," Hansel continued, as if he were giving a routine briefing rather than revealing a galaxy-spanning infiltration. "We have special operations teams embedded in most of your major population centers. But in studying your military capabilities, identifying key personnel, and establishing the groundwork for operations, should diplomatic solutions fail." The alien delegates watched in growing horror as the displays revealed the true extent of human preparation. Council facilities that they had believed to be impregnable were shown to have human operatives working within them. Trade centers that formed the backbone of galactic commerce had been infiltrated. Communication networks that connected the far reaches of council space had been tapped and monitored. "Third, regarding your technology," Hansel smiled as the displays showed human research facilities that had been analyzing captured council equipment for years. "We have been studying your weapons, your shields, your faster-than-light drives, and your communication systems. We understand how they work, and more importantly, we have developed methods to counter them." The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates realized that their entire civilization had been infiltrated and studied like a laboratory specimen. Every assumption about council superiority had been systematically undermined by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The panic was immediate and overwhelming as representatives began trying to contact their homeworlds, only to discover that many of their communication channels had been compromised. The Selothi representative was the first to recover enough to speak. "How long has this been going on?" she demanded in musical tones that conveyed barely controlled terror. "How many of our secrets have you stolen? How many of our people have you replaced?" And Sol looked genuinely surprised by the question. "We have not replaced anyone," he said with what seemed like honest confusion. "Human infiltration techniques rely on observation and analysis rather than impersonation. We found it much more effective to simply watch and learn than to attempt to deceive your security systems. Our operatives have been invisible because they never tried to pretend to be someone else." This explanation somehow made the situation even more terrifying. The idea that humans had been moving freely through council space without anyone noticing suggested capabilities that went beyond mere technological advancement. It implied a level of tactical sophistication that challenged every assumption about galactic warfare. The High Lord speaker clicked rapidly in patterns that the translators identified as extreme agitation. "What do you want from us? What are your demands? How do we stop this invasion that has already occurred?" Insalv straightened his tie one final time and looked around the chamber with genuine warmth in his expression. "The same thing we have always wanted," he replied. "Peaceful coexistence, mutual cooperation, and the opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization. The only difference is that now you understand the alternatives if cooperation is refused." He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. "Humanity does not seek to dominate this galaxy. We have no interest in ruling over other species or controlling their territories. We simply refuse to be dismissed, threatened, or treated as inferior." We offer partnership to those who accept us as equals, and we offer consequences to those who do not counsel. Leader Morpheus' crystal shell had dimmed significantly as the weight of the situation became clear. What assurances can you give us that humanity will not use these capabilities for conquest or domination? The human diplomat smiled with what appeared to be genuine friendliness, the same assurances that any species can give the evidence of our actions rather than our words. We have had these capabilities for over a year and have used them only for observation and preparation. We could have destroyed major council installations, captured key personnel, or disrupted your trade networks at any time. Instead, we chose to pursue diplomatic solutions. Sol gestured toward the displays that still showed human forces positioned throughout council space. These preparations were made not because we wanted war, but because we wanted to ensure that peace would be negotiated from a position of mutual respect rather than human subordination. We are prepared for any outcome, but we prefer cooperation. The vote to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous, though it was clear that the decision was based more on recognition of reality than on genuine enthusiasm. Council leader Morpheus announced the result in a voice that had lost much of its earlier authority. Welcome to the Galactic Council, representatives of humanity. May your membership bring prosperity to all species. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Hansel gathered his papers and prepared to leave. Several alien representatives approached him with what appeared to be genuine curiosity about human capabilities and intentions. The conversations were polite, but everyone understood that the galaxy had changed in fundamental ways. Sol walked toward the exit of the Great Hall, knowing that he would return the next day as humanity official representative to the Galactic Council. The diplomatic mission had been successful, but not in the way that anyone had expected. Peace had been achieved not through negotiation, but through demonstration, not through weakness, but through strength. As he reached the chamber doors, Hansel paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. I look forward to working with all of you, he said pleasantly. I believe we are going to accomplish great things together. The aliens watched him leave, finally understanding that they had not just met a diplomat, they had encountered something far more dangerous. Wearing a diplomat's clothing from that day forward, the Galactic Council operated under a new understanding. Humanity was not a species to be dismissed, threatened, or underestimated. They had proven themselves capable of achieving their goals through whatever means proved necessary. Peace was preferable, but if war was chosen for them, they would wage it with a competence that made their diplomatic courtesy seem almost quaint by comparison.